Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People story. Why would an HOA president sneak onto my property before 7 a.m. with a power drill? My no trespassing signs kept getting removed, my yard turned into a walkway, and then I got hit with a $500 fine by an HOA I'm not even in. So what did they think I'd never find? I've been sitting on this story for a while because I wasn't sure it was fully over. It's over now. Buckle up. I've owned my property for about 11 years. It's a half-acre lot with some old oak trees along the back edge and a little natural clearing that gets good afternoon light. The house itself is nothing special. A 1970s ranch style with original hardwood floors and a screened-in porch that I basically live on from May through October. I bought it because of the trees, the quiet, and the fact that I can see actual stars at night. I paid it off 4 years ago, and for a long time it felt like the best decision I ever made in my life. My property sits between a small lake park about 2 blocks up and a newer subdivision that went up maybe 5 years ago. When I say newer, I mean brand new. We have a community newsletter and an Instagram page. New. HOA, of course. And a strict one from what I gathered early on. They have rules about the color of your mailbox, the height of your grass, and I think something about what kind of potted plants are allowed on your front porch. The neighborhood is all matching roof lines and freshly sealed driveways, very polished, very deliberate. Not my style, but I didn't care about any of that. They were on their side and I was on mine. For the first couple years after they built the neighborhood, the foot traffic across my yard was barely noticeable. A few people walking dogs, the occasional jogger cutting across the corner of my lot to get to the lake path faster. Here's the geography of it. My property is positioned so that if you walk straight through my side yard, you reach the lake park entrance in about 2 minutes. If you go the long way, around the road, it's closer to 15 or 20 minutes depending on how fast you move. So I understand the appeal. I genuinely didn't care much at first. People are gonna take shortcuts. That's just human nature, and I wasn't gonna be precious about it. But things shifted. I'm not sure exactly what triggered it. Maybe the neighborhood got more populated. Maybe someone posted the shortcut on their neighborhood app. But within a couple of years of that subdivision going up, the foot traffic had become a real problem. During morning hours and after school drop-off, there was a steady stream of people moving through my yard like it was a maintained public trail. Dog walkers letting their animals do their business and leaving the tied-up bags just sitting in my grass. Sometimes 2 or 3 feet off the path like they'd made some minimal gesture toward cleanup and called it good. Kids kicking soccer balls through and flattening the raised garden bed I'd put in along the property line. Somebody left a half-eaten breakfast sandwich sitting on my bird bath once. I stared at that thing for a solid 30 seconds before I picked it up. It felt like a specific kind of disrespect. I was still more annoyed than angry at that point. What actually changed my whole outlook was one afternoon when I was out in the yard, and I watched an older man stumble badly on a raised tree root near the back of my lot, the kind that humps up out of the ground and drops back in. He caught himself on a branch and walked away fine, visibly embarrassed, but it shook me a little. Because here's the thing I hadn't fully thought through yet. If that man had gone down and hurt himself on my property and decided to get an attorney involved, I could have been on the hook. It doesn't matter that he was trespassing. Property liability doesn't always work the way people assume it does. I called my homeowner's insurance agent that evening and described the situation. She was not casual about it. She told me to get the foot traffic stopped and to document everything I did to try to stop it. That call was what pushed me from annoyed to actually doing something about it. So I went to the hardware store and bought 3 bright yellow private property no trespassing signs. Standard ones on metal stakes. I mounted them along the property line facing toward the HOA neighborhood, spaced them out so there was no way to miss them if you were walking toward my yard. I felt a little weird doing it because I'm not confrontational by nature and I'd never had any issue with anyone over there, but it was the obvious move and I did it. They were gone in less than 2 days, not knocked over, not blown off by wind, cleanly pulled out of the ground and removed, all 3 of them. I stood there looking at the empty spots in the dirt and made myself really look because I didn't want to overreact to something that had a normal explanation. There was no normal explanation. They had been taken. I figured it had to be bored teenagers, went back to the hardware store, and this time bought heavier-duty metal signs. I bolted 2 of them to trees on either side of the footpath and drove a thick wooden post into the ground for the third, secured with lag bolts, not going anywhere. 3 days later, those were gone too. These weren't signs you could yank out of the ground. Somebody had gone after them with tools. I started to feel a little bit like I was losing my mind, partly because the foot traffic was continuing completely uninterrupted, and partly because a couple of times when I was sitting on my porch and made eye contact with someone cutting through my yard, they actually gave me a look. Not an apologetic look. An irritated one. Like I was the one creating a problem. I posted about it on a local community board online, mostly just to vent, and someone suggested I get trail cameras up before spending any more money on signs. Good advice. I ordered 2 motion-activated trail cameras, the kind hunters use to track deer movement, small enough to sit in a tree branch without being obvious. I mounted one pointing at the left side of the property line and one at the right. Then I put up a third set of the heavy-duty signs, same installation method, and I waited. The next morning, I checked the footage before I made coffee. It wasn't teenagers. The timestamp read 6:47 in the morning. A woman in a matching pastel jogging outfit, visor on her head despite the fact that it was barely light outside, walked across my property line carrying a small power drill, not a screwdriver. A cordless drill. She unscrewed the signs with the calm, efficient energy of someone who had done it before, tucked them under her arm, and walked back toward the HOA neighborhood without ever looking over her shoulder. She was on my property for less than 4 minutes. She looked like she was running an errand. I recognized her. I'd seen her at a distance a handful of times before, always walking a small designer dog and always moving with the air of someone who was about to cite you for something. She was the president of the HOA board. I'd never spoken to her directly, but her face and her whole energy were pretty hard to forget once you'd seen them. About 2 days after I watched that footage, she came strolling through my yard again, her little dog trotting off leash ahead of her, looking for all the world like she was taking a pleasant walk through a park. I went out and met her near the tree line, and I kept my voice level because I wasn't going to get into a shouting match in my own yard. I told her I knew she'd been removing my signs and that I had it on camera, and I asked her pretty directly what she thought she was doing. She wasn't rattled at all. She had this bored, slightly pitying expression the whole time, like she was humoring someone who didn't quite understand how things worked. She told me the path through my property was an established community easement. I asked her where she was getting that from because I'd never signed anything like that and it wasn't on my deed. She waved her hand and said it had been informally recognized by the community and that my signs were actually in violation of HOA aesthetic standards because they were eyesores. I told her I wasn't in the HOA. She looked at me like I'd said something mildly embarrassing and said, "We'll see about that," and walked off. I went inside and sat at my kitchen table for a while. Not because I was scared or upset in the way she probably hoped, more because I understood something clearly now that I hadn't quite articulated to myself yet. She wasn't just being difficult privately, she thought she was untouchable. That kind of person requires a very different response than patience. About a week after that conversation, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. Formatted to look as official as possible, citing me for illegal signage and harassment of community members, and attaching a fine notice for $500. $500 for signs on my own property that she had personally removed with a power drill at 6:45 in the morning. A neighbor from the HOA who I'd chatted with a few times sent me a message to give me a heads up that the HOA president had posted about the whole situation on the neighborhood Facebook group. Apparently she'd referred to me as an aggressive squatter, bragged about how she had handled the situation, and encouraged her neighbors to continue using the path through my yard to, in her words, assert their community rights. The post had gotten a lot of supportive comments from people who had no idea the woman they were cheering for had been removing private property signs from someone else's land before sunrise. That Facebook post settled it. She'd built a whole public narrative, she'd recruited people to keep trespassing, and she'd framed herself as the responsible community leader dealing with an unreasonable neighbor. The $500 fine letter was sitting on my counter, the footage was on my camera card, and she was taking a victory lap online. I did not respond to the fine letter, I did not post anything publicly, I didn't go to her door or argue with the next person who walked through my yard. I looked up property attorneys with HOA experience and made a call on Monday morning. The consultation went about 30 minutes. I laid out everything, the foot traffic, the stolen signs, the trail cam footage, the fine letter, the Facebook post, all of it. The attorney didn't look surprised by any of it. She told me the established community easement claim was not just false, but obviously false, because an easement of that kind has to be recorded in the county deed records and shows up in a title search. It doesn't exist because someone announces it does. She said my first move before anything else should be getting a licensed land surveyor out to establish the exact property line on paper and on the ground. I hired a surveyor the following week. He came out, did his measurements, drove his stakes, ran his string, and walked the line with me when he was done. The path through my yard was 100% on my property. Not close to the line, not a gray area, well inside my lot, but that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was the HOA's brick entrance monument, the big decorative one at the front of their neighborhood, carved stone and brick, manicured landscaping around the base, solar lighting along the edge, very polished, very expensive looking. According to the survey, approximately 3 feet of it was sitting on my land, not on theirs, mine. And the underground sprinkler system running water to the landscaping around the base of it extended even further over the line, closer to 4 feet. I asked the surveyor to make sure he was reading it right. He showed me his measurements, he pulled the county records, he was sure. I sat with that information for a couple of days before I did anything with it. I wanted to understand it fully, and I wanted my attorney to walk me through every option before I moved. When I called her and told her what the survey had found, she was quiet for a second, and then she said in a very measured voice that this changed things considerably. My attorney drafted a cease and desist letter that went out to every member of the HOA board via certified mail. Every single board member had to sign for their copy. The letter covered several things. It included high-resolution prints from the trail cam footage showing the HOA president removing my signs with a power drill, date and time stamped. It included a copy of the official survey with the property line clearly marked and the encroachment clearly illustrated. It demanded reimbursement for the cost of the stolen signs. And it gave the HOA 30 days to remove the brick entrance monument and all associated sprinkler infrastructure from my property at their own expense, with the note that if they failed to do so, I reserved the right to remove it and bill them accordingly. While the letters were working their way through the mail, I called a fencing contractor. The quote came back fast and the schedule was about 10 days out. I had them install a chain link fence along the full length of my property line on the HOA facing side, exactly on the line the surveyor had marked. Not an inch onto their side, not an inch back from mine. Chain link is not attractive, I want to be honest about that. It's utilitarian and industrial, and it clashed badly with the aesthetic of the neighborhood next door. I did not lose a single second of sleep over it. The fence was within my rights, properly permitted, and the contractor's crew did the job in 1 day. I sat on my porch and listened to the posts going into the ground and the panels clicking together. It's a good sound when you're on the right side of it. I also went to the police station around this time and asked to speak with someone about filing a report. I brought my laptop, I showed an officer the trail cam footage and explained the timeline, the signs I'd installed on my own property, the repeated removals, the footage showing exactly who did it and how. The officer watched the video and asked me a couple of questions about how the signs were installed to confirm they were properly secured rather than just loose. He took my information down and told me what I was describing was destruction of private property and potentially petty theft depending on assessed value. He said they'd follow up. They did. About a week later, my neighbor sent me a message saying a police car had pulled up in front of the HOA president's house in the middle of a weekday afternoon, in full view of several neighbors who happened to be outside at the time. 2 officers went to the door. I wasn't there for it. She wasn't arrested because the value of the signs didn't clear that threshold, but she got an official visit on record with witnesses in her own neighborhood watching through their windows. From what I pieced together through my attorney and through my neighbor's updates, the certified letters landed around the same time as the police visit. What followed inside that neighborhood apparently was not pleasant. Most of the board members had no idea the president had been personally removing my signs. They'd believed whatever version of events she'd given them, which by all accounts was a story in which she was the reasonable one protecting community interests from a hostile neighbor. The survey showing the brick monument on my land came as a genuine shock to several of them because the HOA had paid a significant amount to have that monument designed and installed, and they'd assumed their own contractors had put it on their own property. The HOA's attorney apparently told them pretty clearly that they had no easement claim, no legal basis for any fine against me, and that they were in real legal jeopardy over the monument encroachment. He also apparently told them that the trail cam footage made any attempt to frame me as the problem party basically impossible to sustain. They had video of their own board president removing private property signs from a neighboring lot at 6:47 in the morning. There was no version of events that played well in court. The board sent my attorney a check for the sign replacement costs, the exact amount I'd requested. My attorney forwarded it and I cashed it the same day. Then came the part that cost them real money. Moving the brick monument was not a quick job. It wasn't a sign on a stake. It was a large decorative structure with a concrete foundation, wired lighting, and several years of mature landscaping built up around its base. The sprinkler system had to be completely rerouted and reconnected after everything got shifted over to the correct side of the property line. The contractor they brought in worked over several days. I watched portions of it from my porch. I didn't wave or say anything, I just watched. I asked my attorney to give me a rough sense of what the total cost had been. She said she didn't have exact figures, but that based on comparable situations she'd handled, contractor fees for relocating a structure like that plus the legal hours typically ran into the low five figures. Her rough estimate was somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 when you add it all together, the relocation work, the legal fees, the sign reimbursement. All of it because someone decided my signs were eyesores. The HOA president was voted out of her position about 3 weeks after the police visit. My neighbor told me there had been a special meeting called and that it wasn't close. The board members who'd been publicly supportive of her online were apparently not pleased when they learned the full picture, what she'd actually done, what it had actually cost the community, and what the true story was versus the one she'd been telling them. I don't think much about what her life in that neighborhood looks like now. That's genuinely not something I spend time on. What I do think about sometimes is sitting on my porch on a Saturday morning after the fence went up. There's no foot traffic anymore. The garden bed I replanted came in fine. The bird bath has nothing on it that doesn't belong there. Every now and then I'll see someone from the HOA come walking along the path on their side of the fence, reach the point where they used to turn and cut through my yard, and just stop. They stand there for a second, look at the fence, look at the long road ahead of them, and then turn around. The next one is a malicious compliance story. My son is incredibly good at getting what he wants while still technically following the rules. He is 3 and he already runs laps around me and his father. The best example of this is the ongoing battle he has between the Sunday school teachers and his mighty need to obtain all the stickers in the room. His first Sunday that he'd aged up into the 2s and 3s room was the first time he'd seen a pile of stickers available for the kids to play with. When we went to pick him up, he ran over to the table, grabbed 2 handfuls of sticker packs, and tried to head out. He was told by the teachers that those were church stickers and he had to leave them for other kids, but he could take his best stickered craft paper home. He wasn't thrilled. He tried it again a few times and failed, but he eventually accepted and plotted. Over the next few months, he started layering more and more stickers on the craft paper he was allowed to take home until he eventually was coming home with nearly a 1/4-inch thick pile of stickers on his paper. Stickers that would then end up on his car seat, the car door, him, and eventually our house. The teachers had tried a number of ways to distract him apparently, watching videos, playing with him to try to stop his sticker grift. While it would work for a bit, it only took a couple of seconds of not watching him like a hawk and he'd be back adding more stickers to his paper. This past Christmas, it came to my attention that his class had new rules. There were limits to how many stickers the kids were allowed to use per craft. I didn't say much to my son as I didn't want to bring attention to it, but he had that look that told me he knew, and he was back to plotting. This last Sunday, I went to pick him up, and when I said his name, the teacher went, "Humph, right, him," and I asked what happened. She explained that he'd been fine, just he had done all of the crafts multiple times by asking different teachers to help him, bringing home at least 2 of each craft option. Because with every craft he did, he could get more stickers. I'm interested to see what the next rule he complies with is, or if the teachers will just give up until he heads to the 4s and 5s room next year. The next one is an entitled people story. This was the incident where I finally let my sister have it like never before. I got a random knock at my door and it was my sister that I've been NC with for a while now. My parents previously acted like she had no car to come out with, let alone have the guts. Boy, were they wrong. I was shocked to see her, but kept my cool at first. She wanted her mail from us. We had that mail sitting around for months and eventually it got thrown away. I told my sister I'd go over to our parents' house and look for any she might have. And right as I started walking, she asked if I still have her cat and if she could have him back. I told her I do have the cat, and I'm not giving him back. That's when she went off on me. I held my arm up and told her I wasn't doing this right now, and as I turned around to look back, I saw that cat freaking running away from her. That cat likes just about everybody, and he was off like a shot because she was there. He did not want to go with her. He knew exactly what kind of place she'd take him to. My sister angrily got back in her car and started saying terrible things about me as I was trying to walk away. That's when I lost it and yelled at her to leave. She acted like she didn't hear me, so I just pointed to the road and she flipped out screaming, "You want me to leave?" I yelled back at her again to get out, and she started driving away while yelling that she's lost everybody here, I'm a bad brother, etc. She gets outside the gate, then stops and starts backing up, so I closed the gate before she could get back in. She starts flipping out again and screaming, "I hope Mom was worth it to you," because she tries to make our mother at fault for everything. Then she said she'd report me for keeping her cat, which I doubt she'd do because she's a drug addict that doesn't want cops snooping around. I yelled at her that when she really lost me was when she told me our mother was going to die for crossing her. And then I called her out for not buying winter clothes for her kids. She claimed that was after her ex got custody of them. But no, it was before that. Her youngest son came to me in 39 degrees with nothing but a t-shirt and shorts. He didn't even own a coat. I spent $200 on clothes for her kids from the thrift stores, and she still owes me $800 for unpaid power bills and a couple of small loans. She made a really confused face when I yelled that to her, because she likely forgot, but quickly went back to yelling. We kept screeching at each other through the gate, and she kept talking about how I chose Mom over her, so I brought up her biological father, who wasn't there for basically her entire childhood. My sister spent most of her childhood saying he'd come for her, but he never did. She put the idea of this man on a pedestal for her whole life, but she had to go looking for him when she was in her 30s. He never paid child support, cheated on our mother, became a drug addict, and then went to prison, and then ran off to Arizona after getting out of prison. The guy saw her one last time when my sister was 2 years old, and then nothing for 30 years. She yelled her father is a good guy. I yelled back her father's a piece of crap. Then I called her a narcissist who just blames others, and she needs a villain in her life just to function. And then by some miracle, our parents showed up in their car. Our mother tried to soothe her, and I walked away for a couple minutes. And during that time, the cat I'd saved from my sister appeared and was following me extra closely while meowing. He does not usually do that. He was clearly very stressed. I picked him up and put him in my house. Then I went back to see if our mother had calmed my sister down. But she was still losing her mind and saying crap about me. I ended up yelling at her some more through the gate, and after I walked away a second time, my mother told me my sister called me a ducker right before she drove away. I was furious, but unloading on her like that was so cathartic. She made me miserable for nearly my entire life. I immediately got the cat booked at the vet to be chipped that Monday, and now he's registered in my name, so if my sister steals him back, I can call the police on her. And I won't hesitate to do that. Also, I wish I'd remembered to call her out on how I know she's a cheater. She still thinks I don't know. She had at least 3 affairs, one of which was with one of our biological cousins. She's a really ducked-up person, and she's currently blaming it all on her dead boyfriend that unalived himself by ramming his car into a tree after she broke up with him. The guy cheated on her with another woman in her own bed. That woman apparently somehow passed away too not long later. My sister claimed that guy's cheating was why she didn't want to come home before she was evicted. No, she was out drinking, getting high, and probably sleeping around. She was barely home 2 nights a week, barely fed her kids, and didn't even buy them winter clothes. My parents and I stepped up and took care of them in her stead until their dad took them away at the beginning Christmas break and transferred them to new schools. Then he took my sister back to court to finally finalize their divorce and get primary custody. That's just a few of the reasons why we evicted my sister. She is a terrible person and pretty much a lost cause at this point. Addition, I had this post all written out last week for Monday posting. But then just a few days ago, my sister messaged me from a new number out of the blue, and the way she was texting I can only describe as childish and detached, like someone who was struggling to put together a sentence. She somehow had the idea that our mother now had my phone number, which is weird, and the way she was texting me also seemed so detached that I didn't recognize her. First she said she used to be a part of my family, and then she called herself my ex-sister. She's also started calling our mother by name. I did not say anything impolite to her and was genuinely clueless what she was messaging me about because she was so vague. So I just went next door to my parents and handed off my phone to my mother. My mother did not really say anything rude to my sister over text. She even said she'd never stop loving her. but also noted her disappointment on the way my sister showed up to the hospital to see our mother when she was being treated. My mother went into the hospital for a week not too long ago, and my sister visited her at 1 o'clock a.m. and did nothing but talk about herself and how she was a victim when our mother was laying there sick from severe vitamin deficiency from a multitude of different causes, from medication to a stomach defect. My sister's response to our mother was curt, but I wouldn't say rude. My mother then said that all she wanted my sister to know was that our older stepbrother had another child and didn't mean to upset her. Then my sister said that she's not upset and won't let our mother or her family upset her anymore, even though she was the one causing us all severe stress, as my past posts about her will show. Then my sister responded with unconditional love and called that a joke. Then told our mother to eat well and said her grandchildren need her. She spoke as if those kids were not hers anymore. My sister obviously blames us for her losing everything, even though it was all her fault. She acts like we should have had sympathy, but all the years of mistreatment from her added up, and we just couldn't take it anymore. The next one is an entitled Parent Story. So I 20F had a conversation about budgeting with my Aunt 22F, and we went over my monthly expenses. I mentioned I pay my father $50 a week for rent, but I was allowed to pay $200 monthly instead. She said I should switch from monthly to weekly. About a month later, I went on a trip to visit her, and I gave my father a heads up that I would be switching to monthly because up till then the rule was I could pay monthly or weekly. He basically said he doesn't care when I pay him just to get him his money by the end of the month. I gave him the heads up because I knew he was used to it weekly. Basically, he went ballistic, said I'm not allowed to. I asked him why. When he told me I could, he just said, "Well, now I'm saying weekly. End of discussion." Exact quote. Also, I'm in another state at this moment, so this was all over text. I tried calling him and he kept sending me to voicemail. So at this point, I told him that I was going to pay him monthly until I get an actual reason. He in turn first took my TV, then he changed the lock on my bedroom door. While this is happening, I'm also talking to my stepmom about this, and she basically said I sounded entitled, disrespectful, and ungrateful. Now this pissed me off royally, so 1. I kicked everyone off all my accounts I let them use. 2. I'm no longer helping with random home projects. 3. Not buying her or her kids crap anymore. 4. Since I'm allowed to cook again, I'm not, because I was making full-course meals and all they did was complain about it taking too long if it wasn't done by 5:30, even though they didn't care when anyone else cooked. 5. Anything I buy is just for me, I ain't sharing crap anymore. Also should mention he banned me from cooking like a month prior for making too much food and wasting his money. Mind you, I made enchiladas, rice, corn, and pico de gallo. I bought everything for the meal except for like 3 things that were already in the house. I made enough for 2 days, maybe 3 if they really stretched it out. Because my stepmom, the main one who cooks, along with my stepbrother and me, said it's too much work to get off work, then have to cook dinner. They ended up throwing out all the food 2 days later. Then he got mad at me again because I made myself food after I got off work. After all, no one had cooked and there was nothing to eat. He came out of his room at midnight yelling at me, and I asked whether I was supposed to just starve. I don't eat until I get home from work around 10:30. And he was just like, "Well, I banned you from cooking." I then tried talking to my stepmother and she was like, "Yeah, I don't know why he's like this, but he did ban you from cooking." And I told her I was trying to help and she kinda made up an excuse to hang up. So, back to the rent thing, my stepmom also kept saying, "You're a tenant in this house," which I responded, "He's my father, and I'm not just a tenant, I'm his daughter, and you're acting like I'm a random person who rents a room from you." Then she said I was being disrespectful and that she would never talk to her mother the way I talk to my father, and I said, "Don't compare your relationship with your mom to my relationship with my dad, those are 2 extremely different things. Last I checked, your mother likes you and tolerates your presence." And she was saying that life isn't supposed to be convenient for you. Now this really pissed me off because she knew I had as far from a convenient life as my mother literally put me through hell for 17 years before she kicked me out. I literally got my bed and all my clothes taken away and was only allowed to eat oatmeal and rice for like 6 months in 5th grade because I got in my friend's brother's car. And she knows this too because I told her, but I told her, "And don't you think I know life is not convenient? I've known that for a long time. I may only be 20, but I've had to deal with a lot, and you know that, and you act like I'm just some kid who's never had anything bad happen to her." Also should mention this was happening back in November, and I paid him $200 for the month of October, which he was fine with. I was out of the state for the last week of October, which was the trip I was on, but my stepmother said, "You decided to be late to go on a trip," and I said, "And don't try to make me feel bad for going to see 22 font. You didn't have a problem with me going to Virginia right after I started at current job, or whenever Dad tries to guilt me into coming to his home state, even when he literally just talks about me the whole time and calls me names." And she said, "Now I'm confused. How am I trying to make you feel bad for going Timo C, 22F Ant? You allow others to cloud your common sense and judgment. Okay, OP, I'm done." So now everyone has been ignoring me for the last like 3-ish weeks. I ended up just paying my father because I was on the couch and it was freezing and my back hurt, and I asked him if I could get my blanket and he just ignored me. But these people are truly driving me crazy because I don't have any other options, because I can't live with my mother since she kicked me out, and I don't have the money to move out. But sorry for how chaotic this whole post was. Believe me, living through it is just as chaotic, but I just really needed to vent. Anyway, thank you for watching.